Welcome to Honest Admissions, the show where the only thing you're guilty of is growing as an individual. Our first guest today is Stephanie Pierracos, and she's a person that's heavily invested in personal, spiritual, and individual intellectual growth. She's a friend of mine of many years, and today we'll be diving into some topics such as spirituality and mysticism. But first off, we're living in some interesting times, Stephanie.
Yep.
I'm sure you're aware, everyone is. I'd like your thoughts on how it's impacted you, the world situation right now, how you're feeling about it, how you've been dealing with the quarantine, and what kind of changes have happened in your life.
So, as many of my close friends know, I am an essential service worker. I work for a company that actually produces oxygen for clients that are struggling with the COVID-19. So, we're there, I would say, on the front lines, trying to assist people in getting through this virus. So, everything about my work environment has been normal for the most part, but we have had at least 60 cases of COVID-19 that we've been able to help provide them with oxygen to recovery. And it's been interesting, to say the least. Unfortunately, we aren't able to have more than 50 people or even 5 people in a room at the same time. So it's been kind of interesting in the office being so apart from everyone and not being able to have those, office chats with our fellow coworkers. But we're still trying to keep it light and fluffy in that environment, which is good. Um, in my personal life, I've taken it upon myself to actually get into reading. Unfortunately, I can't see all the people I want to see during this time. It would be nice to be able to socialize, especially since the weather's been getting better. But I have been able to get into some very interesting books recently. So, coincidentally, I actually bought a whole bunch of books before this happened. And I feel like it was the universe telling me that I would need this time to actually grow as a person. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's actually a great opportunity to pursue the things that you never really got around to doing. At least I
exactly.
find myself taking up all these new hobbies that I normally wouldn't otherwise do. So despite it being, devastating to the health
Absolutely.
of everyone in the world, of course,
Hmm.
there's sort of a silver lining to it. I mean, I have a chance to spend time with my family that I wouldn't have gotten.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
the next few months I'll probably be quarantined still at my parents' house, and um, typically I work out of Oakville. I'm in Markham right now, so I would occasionally on weekends come to Markham, but at most I'd spend maybe 3 days with my mom and dad.
Mhm.
Now it's like constant communication with my mom, with my dad, and it's just it's it's a nice change.
Yeah,
It's the positive that came out of this situation, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate. At least I'm seeing people at my work um, using video and developing the professional relationships um, even more strongly than we would have in the office.
well,
Um,
we have all the tools at our fingertips in the world right now. So, with all these different kind of apps that we have out there, the technology that's available to us, it's so easy to establish connections, even though you're not physically present in a meeting or in a social setting, or even with your family that's overseas. We have so much at our fingertips to be able to form those connections and maintain our connections and make sure that we're able to communicate with the people we love, right? Or even from an office standpoint, be able to go on with our everyday life, working from home, even to make sure that the businesses are still running efficiently, right?
Yeah, I'm actually glad that you're in an industry or a sector that is providing essential services
Yeah,
to healthcare, and directly as a result of the business that you're in, you're contributing to, you know, helping individuals, at least from what I hear, suffering with COVID-19 with oxygen. Did you want to maybe give a little bit more detail about what exactly you're supplying? Is it to the hospitals, or is it
Uh,
private?
oh, we supply oxygen on to hospitals, to old age homes, even privately to clients that
Yeah,
require oxygen from home.
yeah.
So we've been able to basically cater to any type of client at this point, and making sure our turnaround time is efficient enough so that they're able to get effective therapy for whatever disease they currently have or diagnosis they have, so that we can help them on their way to recovery.
It's I don't know if it's good or bad, but at least for you and your company, this crisis has really provided an opportunity for your business, right?
Yes, it has.
In terms of like supplying oxygen to people that need it. And COVID-19 is a disease that affects your respiratory system. And
Yes.
it's important to supply like oxygen-rich environments to patients so that they can breathe properly
Yeah.
and fight off the illness with whatever medical practices that they're implementing here. So I think it's great that you're still employed, because there's so many people that are in non-essential businesses that are laid off. For example, my sister, she worked for Porter Airlines, and there was a huge layoff there. Luckily, after that, she was quickly hired at another place. But
Oh, that's great.
you
Good
can,
for her.
yeah,
It's a very difficult
you
time
can
for
definitely
people.
see, right, how
Yeah.
some industries are affected negatively, whereas some industries like the one you're in actually thrive.
Yes. And that's the interesting part about it. I feel bad for all the people who are currently sitting on unemployment and have no option to actually get out of their current situation at the moment.
Right.
Competition for jobs will increase due to the fact that so many people do not currently have employment jobs. So there are industries that have been affected quite negatively because of this, and I'm just one of the lucky ones that I still have a job at the end of the day, and B, I'm able to contribute to people's lives during this crisis and make sure that I'm making a difference every day to ensure that we're able to sustain our population and make sure that we limit the deaths that are happening in this country.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a noble cause, and I'm glad you're able to play an important role in fighting this disease and helping slow the onset and the development of the pandemic. Let's go back to what we were talking about before, how you had collected a set of books before
Yeah.
all this happened, right? And
Just coincidentally, I have moments where it's like, I don't know, I guess I'm a writer at heart, and I love writing articles or journaling about anything I've read or any topic that I just suddenly like sparked an interest in, right? So, or an interest in me. So I decided to buy a bunch of books before this crisis actually started. And it was the universe, I believe, telling me that I needed to get back to my basics, start growing as a person, having better use of my time. Yes, it's nice to go grab a drink at the local restaurant with your friends or socializing here and there. But, when you have time to actually think about where you need to be and who you are as a person, and if you're satisfied with who you are, that's great. But I don't think that learning should ever be over. Like,
Right.
after you go through school and you get a great job, like, um, you should never lose that side of you that where you actually want to learn new things. I think that's so important in today's society because it changes so fast that this is actually, it's horrible that it's happening, but it actually can help contribute in a good way to people's lives because they get to spend time with their family. They can start reading, they can start exercising, finding different ways to exercise rather than going to the gym all the time, being out in nature when, on your own, obviously, within the restrictions of, not being close to people while you're walking or, keeping in mind that social distancing is necessary.
Yeah.
But there are ways of getting out there and enjoying the simplicity of life as well. Because I feel like we've been living beyond our means right now. And all the luxuries in life we don't necessarily need at the moment, and people have to learn to realize that when you get back to your basics, you become more whole as a person because you're less reliant on things that are just giving you that instant gratification that you don't necessarily need at the moment. It's the
So
long run that matters.
what would you say are your basics? Like what have you cut out, either intentionally or as a result of, not being able to do it under these circumstances? What's your core foundation of what you find are essential to you, like activities or learning experiences?
So for me personally, I like this is just a very like simple example, but I spoil myself with iced coffees every day, and I can't live without them. But you know what? When I think about how much money I could save and pour that into something more productive than just getting spoiling myself, and entertaining gluttony, that like now I'm able to purchase books for myself and learn something new and share that knowledge with the world. Even from an entertainment perspective, going out and having a beer all the time is not necessarily the most, you know, productive thing to do, right?
Right.
So I like going for walks, I like getting into nature. So this has allowed me to focus on things that are more productive for myself rather than tying up my time with something that is great once in a while but really doesn't do anything for you, right? So when you think about the calories that you take in from going out to all these dinners and stuff like that, when you could be going for a walk in nature and just literally enjoying what life has to offer you, like beautiful trees, the birds singing, like, if you happen to come across a deer on your walk, just seeing how the world is supposed to function without us always relying on, building condos, all the technology that we have, where it takes away from actually having a good conversation with someone, right? You see
Yeah.
people, they go to a cafe and all they're doing is texting the whole time.
Yeah.
Go out and go for a walk with someone. And this way, at least, you can have a good conversation and actually be somewhere that you can see can actually survive without all of these, cell phones and iPads and all this technology that we have.
Yeah, it seems to me that you have a very deep connection with nature
I
and
do.
interest in wildlife and the outdoors, um, possibly hunting, definitely
That's
fishing.
the thing. I love
Birds-
fishing.
Yeah.
But hunting, I am an animal lover, so I don't
Okay.
necessarily believe in hunting.
Okay. On the topic of animals, so COVID-19 has greatly impacted the human population, right?
Yes.
In terms of animals, they're not susceptible to the disease, but the shift in in human activity,
Mhm.
behaviors, and the fact that we're all staying
Yes.
inside, sorry, that changes how the animals are living too, because household pets, their owners are at home all the time,
Yes.
and wildlife, they're seeing less people on the roads, they're seeing less people in cities. Sometimes, at least in Ireland, there's herds of goats that are actually populating these cities that are not, they basically look like they're abandoned, right? So
Mhm.
the wildlife is moving in, and you'll see them walking on streets and stuff, which is completely out of the ordinary. Um,
Yeah.
do you do you have any comments on that? How, from an animal's perspective, as an animal lover, how things have changed for them?
Well, okay, we'll talk about wildlife in a minute, but animals in their homes probably are very happy to have their owners home. They get walked, they get to get fed more, right? Because they're always there. But talking from a wildlife standpoint, we are to expect this kind of movement from happening. I always knew that eventually nature and wildlife would take back the universe because we've been treating it so horribly for so long. Think about the pollution, uh, driving animals away from their homes. Like, this is actually a wake up call, I think, that's allowing animals to now thrive. And it's interesting to see how they're starting to come into our areas, highly populated areas with people, um, and just, going about their normal everyday lives, right? So I thought this was going to happen. I always knew that nature would take back the universe from us, and I just find it interesting, as I would love to see sheep walking across the street if that were me. Um, it's beautiful to see.
Okay. On that same train of thought, what have we been doing wrong as the human species? And with this wake up call, what do you expect that we'll do differently now?
Well, I think that, well, that's the thing. If this has been a wake up call for the human species, I feel like, maybe people will think twice before they litter, or hopefully they will see that, we can't be driving wildlife out of their homes and building up like condos on every block. Like, maybe people will start seeing that changing and getting back to their basics, like I had mentioned before, in maybe taking a more pioneer approach to living,
Mhm.
not necessarily full throttle, but maybe, getting back into farming and that kind of thing, because I don't think there will be enough trust down the road with people being, social distancing for so long. It's going to take a long time for us to get out of this mess. And hopefully it'll just go in a good direction.
Cool. So it seems like you got a positive outlook from what has happened to us and where we can go in the future, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So back to the books. You
Yes.
you have picked up how many books, and would you like to
Oh,
talk a
I
bit
have
about?
several. I have at least 6 or 7 books that I've purchased recently that are of interest to me. I would love to share them with a larger audience because I think they're great reads. Um, from an entertainment standpoint, or even if you would like to get interested in practicing some of these arts that I've been reading about. So,
Yeah. Okay. So let's dive into some of these topics.
sure,
Can we start with numerology?
sure.
So I'm aware it's like a practice of drawing non-numerical concepts from numbers and applying them to many different aspects of life, right?
Yes, exactly
You
what it
can use
is.
it to predict behavior. You can use it to predict romantic compatibility. Some people just have their lucky numbers, and they use it for lottery and gambling. But yeah, there's a bit of mysticism behind this, right? And it's a
Yeah,
very old practice, actually stemming from a Greek uh,
Pythagoras.
Pythagoras, right?
Pythagoras of Samos. He was one of
Greek Greek
the
philosopher.
early known numerologists, and
Yeah,
as people are familiar with the Pythagorean theorem, um, he actually was one of the oldest numerologists known in the world.
yeah.
Yeah, he actually had studied with Buddha. It was said that he was studied with Buddha, and Buddha helped him bring numerology eastwards. So they, on many occasions, got together to create a philosophy behind what they had created with numerology, and they shared their teachings with each other.
I know the Pythagoras theorem because it was introduced in probably before high school, like elementary school. It's just the relationship between the sides of a triangle.
Hmm.
But I'm not sure when this was introduced by him, in which era, but his his school of thought has carried on for centuries, right?
Yes, it
And
has.
and there were periods where probably it was not so popular. But is there now a revival, or are you one of the few people that are taking interest in it, or what is going on with
I
this
think I
world
think
of,
the information is out there.
yeah.
People who are very spiritual will dabble into numerology just because it's um, it's it's more legitimate in terms of what it has to offer you information wise, rather than reading about zodiacs and that kind of thing. It is very similar in its in what you can learn about it. Like the zodiac tells you about your life and guides you. It's a tool for guidance. That's what it is. And numerology does the same thing, but it actually uses numbers shaped to shape your destiny based on your birth. So your date of birth actually can dictate what kind of person you will be. Um, as you had mentioned earlier, what kind of partner you may have in life, what kind of career is suitable to you based on all these numbers that were given to you at birth, starting from your full name to your actual birth date, and even using the vowels of your name can give you a number that can show you your life, who your life partner would be, not necessarily by name, but the kind of partner that would be compatible with you.
Okay, that's really cool. So obviously your birth date is formatted in numbers, but
Yeah.
how do you assign a relationship between your name and the numbers?
So there's a formula. There's several different formulas that actually can create, will produce the number between 1 to 9. It's interesting because these formulas never fail. No matter how, which way you add the numbers in your birth date, your name, it will always add up between a number 1 to 9. So it's very, very interesting to see that. Um, I can give you some of the formulas, like to find your personality guidance information. It's the day of the month of your birthday, and that's the simplest formula that you can get. So if you were born on, let's say for me, for instance, I was born on the 17th of June. If you have to add, if you're in a double digit birth date, you have to add the first digit of your birthday to the second digit, and that will create a number from 1 to 9. That is the assigned number for your destiny. So for your personality number,
So
it's really
there's nine personality types. Is that
there's
and that's
yeah,
what I'm getting from it.
yes, there are.
And that's dependent on your birth date,
When you
adding
were born,
the
yeah.
first and the second digit of your month.
Yeah.
Okay. Have you have you taken an interest in like other personality uh tests and like ones where you have to like fill out a quiz and answer questions and stuff? Like
I used
how
to
would
do
it compare to like other types of personality tests?
Yes, so this is mathematical, right? That's why numerology seems to be more accurate. There's a science to it. When you're dealing with other personality tests, it's more the psychological guidance that you get from it. So it's not necessarily based on a mathematical, scientific formula that actually shows you who you are and where you're supposed to be.
Mhm.
So they both do the same thing. They both can be equally as accurate, but it's more entertaining than anything in my personal
Yeah, no,
opinion.
it seems like something that's just fun.
Yeah, it
Especially
is.
if you get your friends involved and you give them some predictions and some
Yeah.
advice on like how they behave and stuff, that can be quite helpful actually.
It
Um,
is. Some people are looking for guidance, and not everyone has that kind of guidance from the people in their life. Maybe they're just more introverted and they don't want to talk about certain situations with another person. So these are actually tools that can be used to give you that guidance. It obviously the guidance wouldn't steer you wrong. It's not telling you to go out there and light your house on fire, but like it gives you enough information to actually make a good decision in the
yeah,
situation that you're in.
yeah. Um, I have a question. Can 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 anything be associated with a number? There's some obvious things um, like trends in the stock market or like just basic stuff like accounting and finances. But
Mhm.
what about like the elements or different parts of nature or like animals like because I read something a quote that all is number and I'm wondering if there's any deeper meaning or significance behind that all is number.
Yeah, well, everything is mathematical. They say that, well, Pythagoras believed that many different philosophers that believed in numerology actually believed that numbers were for two reasons: measuring quantity and measuring quality. So anything can be
Cool.
given a mathematical calculation to base its quantity of and also its quality.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Um, is there is there a property to each number? Like I found something called vibration. Is there part of the study of numerology? Does that talk about the vibration of a number?
Yes, it does actually. I haven't dipped into that too much, to be honest with you, but it does give reference to the vibration of the number as well. It all depends on what you're trying to discover about the formula that you're using. There's several different types of formulas to calculate information about who you are, what you're supposed to be doing in life, and all of that kind of thing, your soulmate, your destiny. But even from a standpoint for objects, there is a vibration for everything.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
another field.
that's another
Um,
field altogether.
so it seems like there's an application to many different areas, right? Especially biblical stuff. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the religions of the world, but at least what I've been reading in the Bible, there's the Ten Commandments, significant number, the seven deadly sins, and also the number of the beast 666.
Yes.
What other significant numbers do you know of, and
Oh, I know several actually.
do you have one of your own?
555 actually, just so you know, 666 and 333 are known as the devil numbers, or the numbers of the devil. 666 being the most popular. Like number 4 for Chinese cultural individuals. That's also an unlucky number. The number 13 is actually unlucky for some people from certain cultures, but actually for Italians, it's good luck. 555 is a religious number. It's actually known as the number of heaven. So if you ever see 555, it's actually like a sign from God coming into your life and maybe spreading some positivity in you.
Could that be the reason they choose to use that in like fake numbers in
They
Hollywood?
do quite often, yeah, because it's a non-offensive number, and
Okay.
it's very spiritual as well. So people that will recognize so many fives in a row, five is the number of heaven, and 555 is also the number of heaven.
Okay. Was there a turning point after you learned about this study where you're realizing, hey, maybe some of the things that I didn't really notice the significance of before. Now that I know numerology, there's certain numbers, certain things that have become significant.
Yes, they have actually. My personality number is the number 8, and I never liked the number 8 when I was growing up. I always had my own lucky numbers that were from like soccer jerseys that I had for years and years and years. So my soccer number became my lucky number, and I just kept going on with that kind of thinking. But now that I got into numerology, the numbers that shape my personality, my life path, my destiny actually have grown on me, and I treat them as lucky numbers because they're mathematical calculations that were brought to me. And, I use them now in my everyday life as signs.
Cool. So is there a community that is surrounds this field of study, or are you like one of the only advocates that you know in your immediate friend circle?
In my immediate friend circle, I'm the only one that has dabbled into numerology. I want to expose this type of, you know, um, spiritual guidance to people because I feel like it's a good positive way of getting answers out of life. We all have questions, right? And not all questions can be answered, but this allows you to get the guidance that you need to like move forward in certain situations. And also, be in a good, high vibrating, spiritual place in your life.
Awesome. That is really cool.
Yeah.
And something that I would never have, really looked at into until you brought it up. That's awesome. So I want to touch on another one of the books that you've been looking at and the
Sure.
areas of practice,
Hmm.
palm reading or palmistry.
Yes, palmistry.
So I'll
Palmistry.
just start off with a bit of background that I looked up, and then maybe you can expand on that. So the human hand apparently contains a wealth of information. Um, and certain characteristics of maybe your fingertips or the length of your finger in relation to another one um, actually has relation to certain medical diagnoses. Um, in particular, there's something called the simian crease, which is the occurrence of this crease is more predominant in people with Down syndrome. So at birth, it might be actually an indicator, and this is linked to numbers again, right? Like
Yes, it is.
yeah. So
Everything
there's
is
also
more connected. We like to give recognition to like everything can be calculated in numbers. Every line, every mark on your body can be an explanation as to why you are the way you are, from a medical standpoint to even a personality standpoint. So it's very interesting. Palmistry actually came to me recently, and it's so fascinating because the parts of your hand actually dictate different sides of your personality, and they're all named after planets. So, um, for instance, your index finger is uh, is Jupiter, and Jupiter actually tells you about your personality. So the way your Jupiter section here, your Mount of Jupiter section actually looks can dictate to you what you're like as a human being.
Does that draw from astrology, or is there an independent?
It does, but it's also more so, I think, from it's more scientific in a way. No one really thinks of it that way, but like every line on your hand actually means something. Your lifespan, your ability to love. Like there is the plane of Mars, which is the middle of your palm. If it's hollow, it actually means that you're either too generous to the people in your life or you're not generous enough. So if it's flat, that means that you're in sitting in the middle, like you're not overly generous and you're not under generous. So
Hmm.
everything's an indicator of what you may be doing right or wrong in your life. So I've been studying the different parts of the hand recently, and it's so fascinating. Some can calculate your dependency on materials. So it's fascinating.
So I, I want to approach it from a science standpoint. There's got to be
Sure.
some link between like when the brain is being developed and how the
Exactly.
how the the lines on your hand are formed, right?
Exactly. So, from a scientific standpoint, when you think of it this way, back in the days where technology wasn't so advanced, people had to actually try and find ways to be able to predict someone's medical health without using all the science that we have available to us now and the technology, right? So, these were ways of being able to find out how someone is doing medically, how they are doing in their life as a whole, and being able to channel them in the right direction so they can stay healthy or correct maybe a health problem that they have.
That's cool. That's
People
before
don't really see it that
modern,
way.
that's before modern day science and medical
Yes,
advances really took off, right?
exactly.
And people
Mhm.
rely on that. And is it how do you feel you can make it more relevant in today's society if you wanted to be like a spokesperson for these different areas?
Well, actually, there's something that I believe had a link to that is scientific that has a link to palmistry. Palmistry is just an introductory into what a person's medical history is like,
Right.
or current present medical history or medical situation. But there is something called reflexology that also uses the hands to actually determine how your internal organs are doing. It's the practice of reaching pressure points in the hand that actually help the internal organs do better on a day-to-day basis.
So there's a map on the hand, right? And it
Yes, there is.
different areas are linked to different organs.
Exactly.
Do you
So I
know?
believe was the first form of this kind of practice, and then reflexology was introduced probably down the road when they realized that it was so much more than just finding out what your personality was like.
Do you know the origins of this? Have you been able to read about
I
that?
really looked at the origins of reflexology, to be honest with you, but I have studied the different parts of the hand to
Right.
see which, very fascinating. If you see a map of what the hand is like and which organs are linked to which part of your hand, it's interesting to see because you would never think that you would be able to come in contact with your organs through your sense of touch.
That's really cool. I have some familiarity with it because in 2009 I went to Beijing, and part
Mm-hmm.
of the tour package they brought us right next to the Bird's Nest Olympic Stadium. There was a facility where the athletes would go to like unwind,
Mm-hmm.
and there were a lot of massage therapists. They would give you a massage, but there was like a certain science behind it. I saw a poster on the wall of the back of a foot, and it was color coded with different areas, and it would yeah, for sure be linked to different organs.
Yeah, it would
I'm
be.
not sure. I'm not sure exactly how, if it's like the nerve is directly, forms a pathway
Yeah.
to certain parts of the organ or whatnot. But um, certainly, lots of people believe that it's legitimate, and it's carried on throughout history, right?
Yes, it
So
has.
no, it's really cool. So what was um, the thing that tipped you into palmistry? Because did you have any interest in palm reading beforehand, or just you picked up the
Well, I've
book?
always been curious about, fortune telling and tarot cards and that kind of thing. Just from a curiosity standpoint, I wanted to learn more about it just to see what it's about, right? Because everyone always said that there was no chance of any kind of way of being able to predict the future. So I wanted to get into that. So I started reading up on a different topics, and palmistry is.
Oh, you hit yourself on mute. Steph, you muted yourself.
Sorry about that. I do apologize.
No problem.
I'm a busy woman. Sometimes I get phone calls. Um, yeah, so hopefully I didn't lose my train of thought here. But it's fascinating seeing that how people used to predict the future um, back in history, right? So in old forms and old practices that were used to be able to give them an indication of what to be prepared for. Now that's why I got really fascinated in these topics. And palmistry, I actually picked up the book when I was in the bookstore, and I looked at the cover and I looked inside and I'm like, this is the book for me. It
Yeah,
was so well laid out. It had everything I needed to know, and it was an easy read. It was not difficult to understand and actually take away from it and learn how to practice it yourself. And that's why I decided to purchase it. It was more so like my curiosity of the topic, and also um, the author did a fantastic job laying it out for me to be able to understand the ways of palmistry.
yeah. I'm gonna come at you from another angle here, uh, and play devil's advocate,
Mhm.
because in terms of palmistry and numerology, the application of it um, is to predict behavior, predict
Yes,
personality,
yeah,
predict the future. There's not really any, risk of harm, but there's ancient medical practices that were completely wrong, right?
that's
Um,
true.
there,
Yeah.
there, there was they would drill a hole in the brain to let out bad omens, or they would uh, draw blood from your veins and just take out blood. It's called bloodletting, and they believe that it would take out sickness, when in fact both of these practices were causing undue harm to the patient without the administering physician even realizing it, just because it was an accepted practice at the time.
Hmm.
Um,
I
so
I see what you're
the
saying.
application of these fields of study, uh, I don't believe they're actually used for anything that, at least in medicine, right? For like surgical procedures or anything like that. Like they wouldn't, not, to my knowledge, they wouldn't use palmistry to determine or diagnose a patient and then proceed with a medical intervention in that manner, right?
Okay, so I have many things to say about that. First off, I'd like to say that palmistry and numerology are not invasive. So the even if you were to practice them, you wouldn't be making horrible medical um conclusions that will not contribute to someone. getting well if they're actually ill. It's
Okay.
actually more of a guideline. These are just guidelines. So how to base your decision on something that is steering you in a direction, you still should use your own judgment to be able to say, yes, this is what I should do, and no, this is what I shouldn't do. When it comes to using it in medical practices of today, um, doctors to a certain point will use the hands and feet to indicate someone's health situation, not on a level of predicting behavior necessarily, but there are many different ways of telling if you have signs of a specific illness through the
Hmm.
hand.
Hmm.
So still there's a connection there, but not labeled as palmistry.
Okay. Um,
And with all the
fingerprint.
technological advances as
The
well, it's just gonna,
fingerprint. Uh, Different patterns in the fingerprint have significance to it. Is that
yeah.
associated with palmistry as well?
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Can you
I'm
talk
still
about?
something that I'm working on getting some more
Okay.
information
Cool.
about.
And there was one final topic that I wanted to go over with you. I think you are familiar with it through reading, and
Yes.
that's the interpretation of dreams. Do you want to talk about a bit about your book? I'll give a bit of background on what I know, and then maybe you can inform me for the better. So there's people that are in this area, right? That believe dreams contain hidden truths and meaningful information. Sometimes they attribute more significance to their dreams than actually thoughts that they have when they're awake. Um, but I think it all revolves around your pre-existing beliefs. So, um, like if you're a believer in God and you dream about God, then you attach significance to it because that's one of the core things that you resonate with. Uh,
Yes, of course.
and dreams apparently also influence people's judgment. For example, if you dream of a friend betraying you, you might have a different perspective of how they are in real life. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
there was a study where people that dreamt of a plane crash, they would not board that plane because they attribute it to maybe predicting what might happen. And I'll start you off with a quote. Dream interpretation impacts people's everyday lives.
Yeah. So, about dream interpretation, I believe that dreams are signs. Your subconscious wants to uh, basically reveal what you need to do in a certain situation or anything that's been weighed heavily on your mind. You'll actually see or get answers through your dreams. There's four stages to sleep. There's the hypnagogic state where you're gradually falling asleep. The um, breathing and heart rate slow down in your second state of sleep. And then there's the non rapid eye movement, which is the brain is released of the demands of your conscious mind. And the last cycle of sleep is your REM cycle, which is where you would dream and actually be able to remember your dreams. So I find it really fascinating myself. I bought this book called The Dream Dictionary from A to Z. And basically, it talks about several different types of topics of dreams that you may have reoccurring, that many people have reoccurring dreams of the same topic, and it gives you guidance on how to take away why you may have dreamed that specific dream. Like, for instance, I had a dream the other day that I was a spy. And basically, what it was saying that I may have a lack of trust in something that's going on in my life, or I feel like my privacy has been invaded, or I feel observed or watched in a way that I shouldn't be. So it's very interesting what you can take away from this book specifically because it's like a dictionary for any kind of dream you can imagine.
Hmm. So why is it that people that use this book and people that study dreams find dreams to be more significant than your everyday thoughts in waking hours?
Because it's in your unconscious mind. So basically, um, what you maybe feel like, if you have any fears, if you have a specific emotion that's been weighing heavily on you due to something you went through in your normal um o- conscious mind time period when you're awake, um it actually can visit you in dreams in different ways. Like, for instance, if you get nightmares quite often, there could be something in your waking life that is contributing to those nightmares. So, having the nightmares actually gives you a more intense view of your fears or something that you want to get rid of. And it actually makes you think about it when you're awake, because you actually feel like you're living through what you see in your dream, right? When actually it could be something in your waking life that's contributing you seeing that in your dream.
What about people that act on their dreams? Like they attach significance and meaning to some event that occurs in the dream. For example, infidelity, where they dream that their partner is cheating on them, and they make I guess a rash decision,
Mm-hmm.
might that might be based off of what they believe to be true due to their unconscious mind, thinking about it. But in fact, their partner is actually not cheating on them. Do you feel like sometimes you're basing your awake judgments off something that might not actually be happening in real life?
See, that's where interpreting your dream is very important, because sometimes it's just your dreams are just revealing an emotion towards a situation that you may not want to happen,
Okay.
especially with fears. This person, if they were to dream something like that, probably had a great fear of being cheated on and is dreaming about it. So it doesn't mean that there will be infidelity in the relationship. It just means that they have an intense fear about it, and they need to deal with their fear and conquer that fear. So interpreting the dream is so important, because you can actually mislead yourself and actually base judgment and follow through with certain action when you shouldn't be taking that type of action in your waking life.
So there's people that don't actually know how to interpret dreams, but they do it on their own accord
Yes.
incorrectly,
Yeah.
and they make poor judgments based off that because they instead of having the dream, waking up and analyzing it and understanding that they have a fear for maybe losing their job, losing their marriage, losing their kids or something.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of just seeing it as a fear and um, dealing with the fear, they might make a rash decision, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if they were to know how to interpret dreams, if they read the book, or if they contacted someone who is a dream interpreter, um, they wouldn't, go ahead and possibly make a decision that could lead to, actually negative consequences, right?
Exactly. So that's why I would encourage people to seek guidance in this type of situation. If you don't know how to respond to something that you've seen in a dream, there's so much reading material out there that can help you deal with what you saw, rather than following through with an action that has negative consequences. Or even someone that you can even speak to someone that is a dream interpreter that can assist you with this kind of situation as well.
Cool. So of the three topics that we discussed, if you had to encapsulate them into one overarching, area, what would you label it as? Like spiritual studies, mystical
Spirituality.
studies,
Yeah.
spirituality. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Spirituality.
as a segue into the next part of the discussion, how does spirituality and your love for the outdoors intertwine?
Well, just not to bring this up, but paganism is really like come from values of being in nature. So it goes back to the pagan times where people really valued nature and they took signs from every little piece of, I guess twigs on the ground or seeing an animal. Like there's a lot of things to learn about that kind of practice of religion. And I just personally took on spirituality recently because I just felt like I was a bit hollow when it came to my beliefs. Not because I was atheist or anything. I am an Orthodox Christian, but I needed something to basically fill a hole in me that could also um, encompass, like, basically bring in my interests as well. So not only do I get the value of having that awakening, I had an awakening actually recently that made me pursue more nature events and valuing nature more so. But this information that I learn on a daily basis about numerology and dream interpretation and stuff is connected to nature as well in different ways.
Cool. Do you want to talk a bit about your favorite activities outdoors?
Oh, yes. So I love to fish. I have an amazing book right here. I bought this recently. It's the Total Fishing Manual. There's lots to learn on that. I love to hike, being out in nature, as I said, being able to see different animals on the trails. I have books on tracking different animals on your paths. I really love wildlife. So that's like a kind of like a, you could say a hobby of mine, I guess, but it's definitely a pastime that I like a lot. But going back to fishing, my fishing book actually talks about different kinds of recipes for live bait, so not always using worms or lures. It talks about, different kinds of knives that are used for properly cleaning a fish after catching it. It's very, very, very interesting, and it helps me actually become the fisherwoman that I want to be going down the road.
Awesome.
Yeah,
We're going to do a segment called Explain That Gram,
sure.
where I do a deep dive in your Instagram and pull out photos that need a bit more context about what's happening in them. So I'm going to present and let me know if you can see it.
Yep, I can see it. That's me fishing. That was last summer at the cottage. I caught one of the largest fish on the trip at that point so far. I was very proud of myself. I had caught actually over 20 fish that week. It was a lake full of fish, crawling with fish. It was so much fun. And as you can see, I look like the happiest woman alive there.
I'm sure it must have been a thrill.
Yes, it was.
Now, can you give us some context about this
Sure.
photo?
So this was a lot of fun. One day I got invited up to a farm and I decided to take my adventure partner with me, one of my good friends that I had known for years. We always went on little road trips together. And I asked her, I go to her, let's go to this farm. Let's take a chance and see what's going on up there. So we met up with a friend of mine that happened to work on these farms. And she's like, oh, did you want to see some horses? So I was like, of course, I love animals, right? Being the animal lover that I am, I couldn't pass up that opportunity. So I met this beautiful horse and I fell in love with it because I love dark horses and I love horseback riding, and it was a really good time.
Awesome. Did you ride this horse?
No, I didn't get to ride the horses because they weren't my friend's horses. They were horses that she worked on because she actually works on hooves. So she helps and maintains horse hooves. That's her job. But I got to pet them at least and get all up and close with them, feed them some food. So it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
And our final image. Can you talk a little bit
Okay, so
about?
it's interesting that you surprised me with this photo. This was actually my friend's wedding. I had known my friend since grade one, and she had actually left to go back to China for several years. I thought I would never see her again. Well, funny enough, she ended up coming back to Canada. Our friendship started off just like she had never left, which was a beautiful thing. And she ended up getting married to her sweetheart from the US. And we had a good time because, as you can see in that photo, it's a lot of high school friends, a lot of new and old friends, just getting together, having a good time on a nice summer night.
Awesome. That does sound like an excellent time. And with that, let me just stop the presentation. Well, thanks a lot, Stephanie. I'm gonna wrap it up here and roll out the red carpet for you to talk about what's going on in your life. If you want to tell the people what you're up to.
Well, as you know, the COVID-19 crisis continues. I'm sticking to my books for now, but I am making plans to travel in the future. By travel, I don't mean on a plane. I mean traveling around Canada. I've had a new love for Canada more than ever recently, and I just feel like people don't appreciate the country we live in as much as they should. It's so beautiful here, and we have so many gorgeous provincial parks and national parks that you need to visit just to really enjoy what Canada's about. So I'm planning on going camping hopefully in the future. I'm going to a cottage in August. Hopefully the COVID-19 does not ruin those plans, but definitely when this is all in the past and everyone has fully recovered, God bless them, um, I'm going to be bringing anyone I can to come join me on this new adventure.
And that's another episode of Honest Admissions with Stephanie Pierracos. Thanks for joining us
Thank
and
you for having me.
wish you the best.
You too.